Hello, I'm Joan Capurro, and it's my pleasure to host this segment of Marin Women's Hall of Fame show. It's hard to imagine Marin County without the work of countless women shaping the life, culture, mores, and landscape of Marin County. From a Frank Lloyd Wright designed civic center to high-quality public schools, artworks in San Rafael, vast areas of open space, innovative businesses, and a robust network of nonprofits, women have put their mark on Marin County. And Marin's contributions go beyond our county. Honorees have been in space to the Arctic, created social changing documentaries, served in the U.S. Senate, and helped integrate holistic mind, body, medicine with Western medical practices. Since 1987, the Hall of Fame has inducted over 125 Marin women of distinction. And today it's my pleasure to introduce LeeAnn Bartolini, who was inducted in 2013 for her work in education. Welcome, LeeAnn.
Thank you.
And now we're going to share with the community what your life is like, because you're a true Marin native, born, raised, educated. And could you enlighten us on how your young life began here?
Well, I was born at Marin General in 1957. My parents were both native San Franciscans, and they decided to relocate to Marin to raise their young family. And Marin, during those years was a sleepy sort of suburban community. When I tell people today that in Mill Valley everybody rode horses around town and there was a Southern Marin Horse Association, it's hard to believe. Marin was a very safe and wonderful place to grow up as a child. There was an incredible amount of freedom to explore the natural landscape. Right. I also think my parents were committed to Catholic education, and we had an amazingly close-knit community in Mill Valley through Mount Carmel Church. And the kind of support and warmth that existed in that town in the 60s and 70s was just really magical.
Don't you think Mill Valley is still that way, it seems like?
Yes,
it's a very
is.
close-knit, lots of kids there.
Yes.
Mill Valley is beautiful, has a great reputation. So you have a big and extended family. So what role has family played in your life?
Well, my family on my mother's side, interestingly, they came to California during the gold rush. They were silver miners from Mexico, and they go back to the 1600s in Mexico. So there's that side of the family. that sort of gave me a deep love of California, which is why I've never left. You know, a deep sense of the luckiness that we have for living in this state and developing the state in the way that we all have contributed to it. And my dad's parents were immigrants from France, so that sort of gave me an interest in travel and, as my grandmother called it, the old country, and to understand the historical past of the family. My father is an involved Marin citizen. He's been on so many different, involved in so many different organizations that was an early influence too, witnessing him out and about in the community. And both of my parents' commitment with their children that we had to do something in the world that served other people. That was just a fundamental in our family. My mother, for example, she wasn't big in terms of volunteering in organizations, but she could never pass anybody on the street without lending them a helping hand.
Oh.
And witnessing that, I think, as a little girl, just really instilled in me sort of the need to give back and to be caring and empathetic towards others.
Yes, that's what we do, is we watch our parents and then we mimic them, if you will. And of course, I know your dad. I'm a Marin forum with him and have so much respect for him. He gives us 5 minutes of history every month, and I don't know where he comes up with them, but they're pretty funny.
I picked great parents. I'm very lucky.
You picked good parents, I know, that's for sure. You've been a professor of psychology at Dominican University since 1985. You've earned 3 degrees from the university. What attracted you to Dominican? I'm asking you that question, but I could understand I'm attracted to it. First as a student, and then to join the faculty. What's kept you engaged?
I've actually earned 2 degrees at Dominican, but my 2 undergraduate degrees, a degree in psychology and a degree in art history, and then I went on to graduate school at California School of Professional Psychology when it was in Berkeley, and earned a master's and PhD there, so I actually lived in the East Bay for 5 years. I never really envisioned becoming a professor, to tell you the truth. My first idea was to be a community mental health psychologist in Marin, and I was on the community mental health board during the early 1980s after Proposition 13, and we spent a lot of time dismantling the amazing mental health system that we had created in the 70s here. And I quickly realized as a graduate student that there weren't going to be those positions for a community mental health psychologist. My first job was working with Catholic priests and nuns who had psychological difficulties. And then I just began part-time teaching at Dominican at my undergraduate alma mater, and realized that I had a knack for teaching and I loved working with students. And I started out part-time there, and in 1992 joined the faculty full-time. And it's hard not to love Dominican. It's a beautiful place.
Beautiful.
But it also was just really deeply informed by the Dominican sisters, who are this marvelous group of liberal women who were very forward-thinking in terms of women's education, and also really strong in community activism, and really instilled those values throughout the university.
Yes, I see that. I've met some of them on the Women in Leadership and Philanthropy, and love them because they're an age that's mine or greater, and they are activists.
Yes.
And they're very wonderful. So.
And there's only a few left teaching at the university, but I think their legacy lives on in just the sort of energy and spirit that is Dominican.
Right, and maybe that's why they're involved with WLPC. Yes, it's wonderful. I'd like to have gone there myself. You're known to encourage your students to look beyond the boundaries of the United States, and you've led more than a dozen overseas trips with students. Why is international travel so important to young people today?
I think it's really important because I think through travel we really develop compassion for other people. We can really begin to see reality when we watch the news or read it in the paper. We can envision ourselves there. And I just love seeing the excitement on a student's face the first time they see a famous monument or a piece of art that they've studied. Even though I'm a psychology professor, these classes really aren't psychology focused, although I have gone with students to Freud's house in London. They're really cultural immersion experiences, and so I try to bring in guest speakers and experts in whatever country we're visiting so that students can really learn the sort of the cultural values of where we're going and how to be good citizens in the world. And really kind of deepen students, not just travel as being a sightseer, but travel as thinking about our responsibility as people of the world and what do we want to give back.
Right. Do you know of any of the students, because of the traveling, that have gone into work that was international?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, so.
Yeah. So like one of my students I just had coffee with recently, which is a common thing that happens with Dominican faculty and students. You maintain long-term relationships with your students.
Yes.
And this one student just did a delegation to Rwanda as a human rights representative for the United States.
Great.
So
That's
I
fabulous.
definitely hear from students that these first sort of introductory trips, whets their appetite for future travel.
It affects their profession. I mean, that's fabulous. It's got to be exciting for you. You and your Dominican colleague, Sister Carla Kovac, have taken students to Uganda and urged the Dominican community to adopt a village. Why Uganda, and how did that evolve? How did that happen?
Well, one of the wonderful things about being a college professor is that every 7 years you receive a sabbatical. So in 2001, I went and taught in Thailand, and at a Bangkok University in Thailand, which was a fabulous experience for me and my family, just living in another culture. So when it was time for another sabbatical, I started looking at my students in the classroom. Many were African American women, oftentimes first-generation students, and I realized that I needed to speak more authentically about Africa. And so I decided to go to Africa for my sabbatical, and I met a wonderful priest named Father Kizito, and a woman who was here touring California, who was the youngest member of parliament in Uganda. I sent her an email. Email's fantastic. It connects us so quickly. She welcomed me to stay with her family in Uganda, and so for 2 weeks I lived with her, and every day I visited a different women's organization in the capital city, was excited to see all the good work that's being done on women's issues there. Then I went out to this village, and where Father Kizito was a parish priest, and lived in the village for 2 weeks, and he took me to visit different women's groups. I learned about domestic violence, about rape, about HIV, impact on women, orphanages, health disparities, and the terrible crisis of water there, the lack of water. Came back, Sister Carl and I, she had been there the year before me, started to talk about we needed to bring students there and give students the same experience we had. So we first started by raising money for a water tank in Uganda, and people at Dominican contributed to a number of different water tanks. Sister Carla started a bed net fundraising for anti-malarial protection. And then in 2011, we brought 10 students with us to Uganda, and we toured around mostly in village areas, every day doing a different activity, and then doing 2 community-based workshops for local residents. People walked 2 hours to come to our workshops, and the students were absolutely incredible. They taught local residents about hygiene, about composting, about taking care of their pigs and chickens, about how to start a business. So we impacted about 1,200 people in those 2 groups. This year we're doing it again. We're taking hopefully 10 students back, and we're really going to focus in trying to make change in this village. I didn't know it was actually called Adopt a Village. I'm glad that's the question, because it gives me an idea for what we should call this project. But we're really trying to help this particular village make some changes and really partner with them. We ask them what they need, and we bring it to them.
Fabulous story. I mean, I wonder if maybe, and the next time you go, if you can, your father's a Rotarian.
I spoke about it.
Okay,
I spoke
did.
about it
at
Marin Forum, I think. I spoke
Right.
about the work in Uganda.
Yes, that's just fabulous. And do
yeah.
you know of any students that, because of that,
Well, one
work?
of the nursing students really wants to go and work in Uganda. Another student went on into public health. 2 students have done international MBA programs that went on the trip with us 2 years ago. And everybody, also because of email, have kept
Right.
relationships with people there. Different people are sponsoring students to finish college. it's just amazing how a little bit of American money can go so
Right.
far there too, and so you really feel like you can do something with $100.
I was just going to say, I bet we could go out to dinner and easily do a whole lot more for that
Yeah,
kind of village
yeah,
than that.
yeah,
That is a great story. I mean, that's community service
yeah.
above and beyond. Let's see, in 2003, you co-founded the Women in Gender Studies program at Dominican in order to offer a framework through which students examine gender as it interacts with race, ethnicity, class, and sexuality. Can you tell us a little bit about that program?
Sure. Well, the co-founder was another Dominican sister, Sister Patricia Doherty, who's a historian. And we had been teaching women's-based classes for more than 10 years. And certainly the women's curriculum goes back into the 70s at Dominican, where many women's studies programs were founded in the 70s. So why did Dominican wait until the early 2000s to do this? Was because we began to realize that as advances in women's issues really we had made strides in changing some of the conditions for women, but particularly in the United States between 1970 and 2000.
Big changes.
There was still a lot of work that needed to be done, and this new generation of students didn't really see that. They sort of felt like, the kinds of issues that feminists took up in the 70s, it was over. And Sister Patricia Doherty and I felt like it wasn't over, that we still needed to challenge students to think about these complicated issues around gender. And so in order to sort of institutionalize the kinds of courses that were being offered across the university in many different departments, for example, nursing had women's health, history had another number of classes, literature had a number of classes, psychology did, we decided to start the major and the minor to sort of give students more of an integrative experience of learning about all of these different intersections. So it's really a cultures-based classes and thinking about gender as just another culture and how does it impact us. And
Interesting you talk about from 1970 to here, because I remember 1970 and what it was like for women in business, and we've come a long way, but I think we have a long way to go.
Yeah, and you really see that internationally too. I mean, there's still things in
Probably
this
even
country that need to be done.
Yeah.
But when you go out of the bounds of this country, you also see how much more needs to be done. And so it's kind of a lovely blending for me of that international women's concerns that I have, and trying to get students motivated and interested in gender issues, not just women's issues, but men's issues too.
Right. That's exactly what I agree, because I listened to Jennifer Newsom speak this morning at Big Brothers Big Sisters, and she has a lot to say about the young boys and young women. Did you see her movie that Reflections, what's it called? Misrepresentation.
Misrepresentation.
It
Yes.
was fabulous. They showed that this morning.
Oh, wonderful.
Amazing. So I'm glad that you're doing this.
So the program's been renamed Gender Studies.
Good.
And there's a lot that needs to be talked about in the lives
Right.
of men too, and
Right.
helping men achieve all they can achieve.
Yeah, I think if we don't learn together, it doesn't work. You can't help men or just women. It has to be together. You've served on many nonprofit boards. I think that's in your whole family, certainly your dad, and committees in Marin. So including, Marin Mental Health Board, Bucklew Programs, Marin County Psychological Association, Marin Organizing Committee, and for 10 years as a member and past chair of the Center for Domestic Peace, home of the original Marin Abused Women's Services. Why has this kind of work been important to you, and what do you get personally out of the volunteering for these services?
I think it links back to what I was saying in the beginning of just having this fundamental belief that as a human being, it's not always about us, it's also about giving, and also obviously through giving you always get something back, you always gain a different perspective, you're always advancing your own knowledge and your own relationships with people. So it's really a two-way street. And I really care about this community, and I care about Marin, and it's just sort of a natural fit, that when you see a need that you think maybe I can do something to, help with this need, advance the cause of whatever organization I've been involved with.
I know you can't, I don't think you can give yourself away enough or enough money Because anything you ever do comes back twofold.
Yes, absolutely. I
And
totally agree.
That's for your family and for your students, because really you're the model. And you are a model of all this. Let's see, you were inducted into Marin Women's Hall of Fame in 2013. So how did you feel when they notified you that you were going to be inducted?
Well, frankly, a little embarrassed, because, I have ambivalence about attention. And, of course, a part of me likes it, but a bigger part of me likes to sort of just work underground and behind the scenes and make things happen. But I really felt honored, especially when you look at the list of women. I've known and read about almost everybody in the Marin Women's Hall of Fame my whole life. So to actually be joining this incredible group of women really, really means a lot to me. And I felt so honored and privileged the night of the induction ceremony.
They're wonderful little ceremonies. And what I love about them is just learning about the woman who's been chosen, what you do. Because none of us really realize how much the other person does. And it's always very moving. One lady told me that she cried when she heard. I thought, oh, I wouldn't do that. You're not supposed to. But I love that this happens, and this is 25 years old now, because I think it's what is going to help more women, and young women particularly, strive to do the kinds of things that some of the people who are or all of the people who are in the Hall of Fame do. So,
I mean, one of the things I talk to my students about is was a real absence of telling her story, telling women's stories for centuries and centuries, millennia, in fact. And so it's really exciting that there's this website, they're doing this kind of programming so that women's history isn't lost. And that future generations can go back and hopefully be inspired by the different activities that all of the women were involved in.
I've just been inspired reading about what you do and in talking to you about going overseas, and I'm thinking to myself, it'd be nice to be in your class. And could you tell us just a little bit about some of your students? Is there a student that stands out, not for best grade or anything, but how their life changed taking your class? I'm just throwing that in extra, so it's not like you would have it. But.
Right. Well, I'm just, I'm thinking about probably the most exciting thing for me to see in students is that somebody comes into college at 18 and they don't have a voice. They're often quiet in class. You can feel their timidity, and in 4 years you see them blossom. One of the students that I worked on this last year with 1 Billion Rising, Dominican, was a leader in the community and making a flash mob happen down at the Santa Fe Plaza on February 14th. And this one student, Jasmine, was a good example of someone who was very quiet when she started Dominican. And she was actually a women and gender studies and politics major. And just seeing her find her voice, find her power, and really feel like she could lead and be an activist her own self, it's really exciting. And then seeing other students go on to graduate school, become psychologists themselves, establish themselves in practice. And at a small institution, students do email and write you and thank you for your part. It's just a part in their development, but it's a really satisfying feeling to know that as an educator, you contributed to the person that they've become, and they're sort of reaching their goals. So I see it, time and time again. There's so many different students I could talk about that really just transform during the college years and really feel like they can, take on whatever challenge is ahead of them.
Make you feel like you're their mom and you've watched them grow into something wonderful.
Yes, definitely. I think a lot of faculty have that feeling at graduation that we were part of the birthing process of this, especially with younger students. Of course, at Dominican, we have a lot of returning older students who come to school, and they're just as exciting to work with. But that same sort of developmental change in them is not as obvious because they've done a lot of that work already because they're coming back to school in their 40s and 50s.
Oh, yeah, right, exactly. Well, the last question is, not a question. One of the things we talked about that you volunteer for Marin County Jail Ministry for women. So
there's a wonderful woman who's in the Marin County Hall of Fame, and her name is Sister Marian Irvine. And many years ago, she and I started talking, and I was interested in a ministry she was doing at the women's prison in Northern California in Stockton. So I used to go over with her to Stockton, And unfortunately, they closed that prison. We only have a prison now in the south of the state for women. And we changed the jail ministry to the jail in Marin County, the female unit there. And I've been going about once a month for the last 13 years, meeting with women in the jail. And it's really just a time to be with the women that are incarcerated. We don't have any, huge agenda. It's really just to listen and to share with them. I often bring some poems that go along with the spiritual reading of the day, and really just let the women know that there are people on the outside that care, that are willing to give time to them and talk and just be with them and sort of, share the experience with them.
Very
and it's really
rewarding,
it's really been quite an experience, because many times on a Sunday afternoon I don't really want to get in my car and drive over to the jail, but I do, and then I always leave with some wonderful gem from one of the women that makes me sort of just see life a little bit differently. And and it's also been great in terms of teaching, just learning about our criminal justice system and the problems inherent in the criminal justice system, and sort of seeing that from the inside has really been another kind of side gift for me, but that wasn't the reason that I did it.
No, but it's rewarding, because then you can spot things in other students maybe that help you see where you could give them some advice that might guide them. So good for you. Well, so all in all, what advice do you have for women in the community that you think you'd like to share for their life, for them being who they are and engaging in the community and supporting the community and being a full life?
I think a huge challenge for women is loving ourselves for who we are, and so I think that is really important, and sort of self-love and self-compassion, so I think I'm going to start there. And then just believing that you have something to contribute. I think too many people don't feel that they do, and I think everybody does have something they can contribute, and the importance of getting involved, not just at, I think women today are terribly divided between duties of motherhood and duties of work, and thinking about getting involved, and yet something, again, can feel very stressful, but I think there's small ways that people can do that. So I would say start small while your kids are young, and as your kids gain more autonomy, then you can become more involved in your community.
Great. And you did that, and you started very young, I know.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, LeeAnn. Thank you for sharing your incredible life with us. Thank you, viewers, for tuning in. The Marin Women's Hall of Fame is a project of the YWCA of San Francisco and Marin. If you would like to learn more about the Hall of Fame and our honorees, please visit www.ywcasf-marin.org. And thank you so much.
Thank
LeeAnn.
you.
You were
very
great.
much.
Terrific. We're proud of you.
Thank you.
And we appreciate your help.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.